Hey guys, welcome back to War Thunder, and welcome to a Italian tech tree video. It's about time that we take a look at some of the aircraft in here. We're going to start off with the G14, one of my favorites. But before I go and talk about the plane, maybe skip the next 2 minutes if you're not interested, but I want to talk about the spading process and about the unlocking process, how I went through the entire Italian tech tree in 4 days. It took me 4 days to unlock and spade every single one of these vehicles. With the exception, by the way, of the G91s, the new two top-tier jets at 8.0. I have not flown yet, and I'm saving them for a live stream with the jets in the very near future. So, what I did was, I started off at the bottom of the tech tree, obviously tier 1 and tier 2. I converted. I converted because I knew that the matchmaker on the first day and the first 2 days is going to be very slow. Trying to play biplanes, trying to play the monoplanes, even the very early ones, not enjoyable planes. Reasonably bad armament, not the best of performance, and even the grinding process on spading them later on was not the most enjoyable one. So I went through the converting process, spent about maybe 2,000 golden eagles or so, probably even less. These are very cheap to research, and I went straight to the Sparvieros. I knew the Sparviero grind was going to be the worst, so I went and got it done immediately. So, as I was spading the Sparvieros, I was getting the research points, unlocking the upgrades, obviously, and spading them, to unlock all the tier 3 props. By the time I was done with my last tier 3 bomber, I already had my first tier 4 fighter. So what I did was, I was researching the G14, and I wasn't quite at it, so I flew a couple of matches in the G55S, the tier 4 premium, and unlocked the G14. Put a talisman on it, flew it for a bit, unlocked the F-84G, put a talisman on that, and grinded out the remainder of the tech tree. So in total, I wasted probably about the 2 talismans worth plus the converting. I'm gonna say below 5,000 golden eagles, which again it is quite an amount. But to understand, obviously, first of all, I gotta grind through the tech tree quite a bit faster than regular players do. And if you are looking to grind through the Italian tech tree as fast as possible, my suggestion would be obviously get the G55S whilst it's still very good. The optional would obviously be to slowly grind and then put a talisman on some of the lower tiers, but in all reality, at the moment, the Italian tech tree is the one that's the easiest to be grinded through. If you're looking for jets, if you're looking for, pushing through to the top tier combat, by all means, now's the time to do it. But the question is it worth it? And in reality, the Italian tech tree, whilst very fun to play, the fighters are repetitive, which means they have the same armament, have the same flight style. That's the same reason why I kind of went for the G14 and the F-84G, because these were the 2 planes that were standing out. They were different from what the regular tech tree had to offer. And their playstyles are, well, different as well. The G14 obviously is a BF19. It follows the normal playstyle. The F-84, we'll be covering in a video shortly, is a fantastic plane at the moment, arguably very under-tiered at 7.3. Nothing can really catch it. That vehicle has performance practically of 8.0. As for the G91s, again, I have not flown them yet, but from what I've seen and from what I've heard, from what I've played with, very enjoyable planes and very maneuverable, but again, very, very fragile when it comes to the ripping speeds. And so, if you're looking to progress through jet combat as fast as possible, yeah, this is the easiest way to do it. If you're looking for unlocking aircraft that you'll actually be able to use in other game modes, that's where the kind of catch comes in. Since there's no Italian tanks, and really probably not going to be any in the near foreseeable future, if you're looking for a jet, I would still suggest looking at the other 5 tech trees, as when you unlock something, you can also use them in other game modes. Here, you're pretty much forced to play air realistic battles, or obviously if you're playing something else, but you're forced to air battles regardless. There's no interaction with ground forces, so the 24, the 32 Hua rockets that you get on the F-84 are useless, redundant. There's really not much you can do with them, albeit there's a couple of tricks when it comes to the grinding process, but overall there's not much that these planes have to offer outside of the fighter mode. And if we return back to the fighter mode here in the G14, I actually struggled with this plane, and it had a bit of a weird placebo effect on me. It's because I'm used to flying BF-19s. They're some of my favorite planes in the game, hands down. Great defensive flyers, and when I went through the skin grinding process on the G10, G6, G14, and the K4, I used these in a very specific manner, which was mounting the MG151 in the nose, no gun pods, stealth, and minimum fuel load. So when I unlocked the G14, put a talisman on it, I was expecting to have very good matches, and I didn't. I didn't because the plane wasn't spaded. The stock to spaded performance is still something in the game that you have to go through. And the reason it's bad is because not just of the engine performance or the overheating, mainly for me, it was stock gun belts. I'm a stealth fanatic. which means I can't aim unless I've got stealth loaded up. And so my very first couple of matches, likely enough, I had the talisman on, so I didn't actually have to play with the tracers for too long, but the tracer ammunition really tipped me off. The 13mm, especially, the 13mm that you have on the BF-19 series, have very, very vivid colors of tracers. As a matter of fact, they almost resemble the Italian flag when you're firing, ironically. But they're blinding. Tracers are great if you're trying to see where the bullets are going, not to see where the bullets are hitting. And this is one of the common misconceptions when it comes to using stealth. Stealth is there for two reasons. It's there to show you where you hit, and it's there to show you, or rather not show you, that you're firing. So with tracers, my main problem is that I'm shown where the bullets are flying, and it blinds my aim. I'm not able to see where the indicators of damage actually happen in the enemy plane. With stealth, I can see the little hit indicators, the little, you can even call them, micro sparks almost. If they're hitting the rear of the enemy aircraft, I know that I'm leading a little bit to behind. If I'm hitting the front of the aircraft, I know I'm leading a little bit in ahead. And if I'm not getting any of those indicators, then I'm likely missing the target altogether. And it comes down to muscle memory. Once you've flown the plane a handful of times, you'll get the lead indicator in, and pretty much it's a no-brainer. You know exactly where to aim. And with the G14, the ironic part was that because this was the only plane I had flown out of the BF-19 series in over probably a year and a half that didn't have the stealth loaded up and had stock performance, I actually suffered way more than with any of the other Italian planes. Because with the Italian planes, they come stock. They come with MG151s. They come with a different flight model. They come with a different look. And you relearn them. But when it comes to the BF-19, I had expectations, and the expectations were not met by the stock performance. However, I will return back to the BF-19 G14 very shortly to get up to about, I think, 100 kills, just for the sake of of flying it. It has a beautiful camouflage, beautiful performance, and my only main concern was that I was flying it as a pure defensive flyer here, aggressive defensive flyer. And what happens is, in most of the matches I'm about to show you, even though the matchmaker and the teams were pretty good, my main issue was obviously I was being outnumbered. An F-82, 2 Spitfires, maybe a third one coming in. A bit of a large bite to really chew on when it comes to this amount of players. This patch hasn't just made a change to the performance of certain guns, it's also made changes to the performance of damage models. It now takes less shells on average to shoot down enemy planes. This has been a grand slam. I cannot put it any other words, but this has been a grand slam from the perspective of Gaijin. We're moving into what I think is almost perfection, and that is we only need to have a buff happen to large caliber guns. 20s, 23s, 30, and 37mm. Once those guns get buffed, you will reach a game mode in which the only RNG that could possibly ever happen when it comes to preventing you from shooting down an enemy player is ping. And that is the only RNG that should ever exist in the game. The only chance of the enemy surviving should always be based purely on the high ping ratio. Nothing else. And that's why I think the current performance of 50 cals is not overperforming. Maybe they're doing slightly more than, what most players are expecting to, but it's great to see them. I think 50 cals at the moment are fantastic. 20mm are pretty good. 37s and 23s I've struggled with. I've flown the MiG-9. It's not that enjoyable. A lot of hits, a lot of sparks. That I would like to see fixed. But when it comes to overall performance and where we're moving with patch 1.69, I mean, nothing short of a grand slam. But I think what a real grand slam is when you finally figure out how the G14 is flown. I think if you're somebody who's still learning how to fly, BF-409s, let me give you a quick rundown. I like to use main engine controls. Close down the radiators to 0%, that's the only thing you have to worry about. Stealth in the 13s, stealth in the MG141 and those. No gun pods, minimum fuel load. First target we engage, Tempest Mark 5, tries to evade, loses half of the wing, and we already know that he's going to go down, so there's no need to dive after him, leave him, and re-engage the enemy. P-51 and a Spitfire to be chosen from. Spitfire is already being engaged. We'll let him go and we'll engage the P-51. Now what you're about to see here is a classic case of a target fixation. The P-51 wants to kill me. He sees me and he sees only me. He completely ignores the Focke-Wulf 190 that's diving down on him. So whilst he's thinking how he's going to go ahead on, the D9 simply finishes him off. At this point, all we have to do is maintain air superiority. We've got the altitude advantage, we've managed to push the Spitfires low, and that's the really main way that you kind of take apart a Spitfire team. You want to drag them down low, you want to get them to lose the altitude and their energy in turn fights, and slowly take them one by one. And a bit of a personal tip, because I just noticed, as I'm watching back through this game, there is a premium Spitfire going after the AI. The AI are either bow fighters, if you're flying the Germans, or the Bf-110s, if you're flying the Americans. These AI are spotter planes. They fly in a formation of 3, they're easy to kill, they're oblivious, I mean, they're AI. However, if you're flying a premium, I don't really see a point going after them. Your job in a premium should not be farming silver lines, which is the only thing you're going to get out of them. Your goal should be going after research points. If you want research points, you got to do 2 things: damage and win. Killing AI likely is not going to be contributional to a team. So I would personally suggest to you, if you're trying to grind, don't go after AI. There's a P-51D up above us. He made a very lethal mistake of being pretty much tag teamed by everybody now. One of the big tips I can give for a P-51, again, I'm giving tips here on enemy planes rather than the G14, but I think the G14 is an aircraft that pretty much speaks for itself. It's a pure defensive flyer with that tint of aggression, and, put into a perfect dogfight, really is enjoyable to fly. P-51s, right? If you're climbing above altitude of about 6 to 7k, personal advice is look at what your team is doing, look at where they are, look at if they're still alive. Because the last thing you want to do is be the last man standing at high altitude in a P-51. Only a very patient and a very skilled pilot will be able to turn a P-51 at altitude against several players. And this is top tier for the P-51, and actually survive and endure it. What the D-30 did here is he took the classic bait, he went after my squad mate, dove. I mean, this is practically what you're watching here, is throwing away 7 minutes of site climbing and maintaining altitude to try to get 1 kill, whilst there are many other easier kills to get. And what he's doing is foolishly flying directly into a swarm of enemy Bf-109s, and obviously nothing they could have done. And whilst I was diving down, I spotted the Spitfire. He did a bit of a stall. I mean, he was dead regardless. It was more of a matter of question who's going to get the kill. Didn't mind taking it along the way. And this is really where the match just ends. This is the end game. This is the point where you realize that the enemy team can't do anything. They got nobody at altitude. They have nobody to contend. They simply don't have the numbers. A couple of ground pounders, a couple of premiums still left up. Obviously, our job to clean them up as fast as possible. But as it came, just nothing that could have been done. Also, bombers. Another tip I'll give you, if you're flying a PB-4Y or any kind of bomber on Norway, there's absolutely no point in trying to go around the side of the map, because the total amount of time you spent is probably about 10 to 12 minutes to finally reach your bombing target, to perhaps make, I don't know, 1.5k RP. It just isn't worth it. If you're flying bombers, my personal tip is, especially on Norway, dive straight down to the deck, go after the bombing targets, do as much damage as quickly as possible, get taken out, and rinse and repeat. Bombers aren't made to stay alive, and if you're trying to stay alive in a bomber, you're doing one of 2 things. You're either lengthening the match for your team, or you're lengthening the match for the enemy team. At no point did bombers really effectively carry matches, at least not in the current meta of the game. So, from somebody who went through spading the entire Italian bomber lineup in pretty much 24 hours, I'll give you a personal advice. Fly bombers fast, low, do damage, and bail out. It would be the easiest and fastest way to do it, and efficient one at that. If you do want to use them as gunships, there's no point gunshipping in high altitude, because you'll get engaged by one player who's confident, one player will shoot you down, and with the current damage output, and again, the damage models for bombers are still a little bit stronger, they'll take you out in a matter of moments. And speaking of bombers, if you're not comfortable flying this plane out as a competent fighter, by all means go after bombers. I mean, there's always plenty of them. If you're talking about American teams, at least 4 bombers will be spawned in every single match you play. So, mounting the plane with the optional MK108 in the nose and the optional MK108 gun pods or the MG151 gun pods, this plane can be turned into a relatively kind of heavy fighter, very hard-hitting plane to infuse massive damage onto the enemy. Personally, I don't like using gun pods on Bf-109s. About a year ago, yes, I was all over the gun pods. I thought that having the extra armament, having the extra damage output was very friendly, very good. Again, with the current damage model nerf and the performance of MG141s, I simply don't see the need of additional firepower. The amount of shells you get with the MG151s in often enough cases should be enough for a 4 to 5 kill match if you're preserving ammunition and flying very well structurally, as well as having trigger patience. But if you're that kind of player who likes spraying a bit, who likes having the extra firepower, by all means, mount the gun pods, side climb, get up to the bombers, and just absolutely tear them apart. And one of the things about bombers I never quite understood is the overwhelming amount of precautions they take from being shot down. The PP4Y here had a very good idea. I mean, the idea is, let's try to run away from the enemy who's about to shoot me down. Well, maybe not the best of ideas, because what he does is he eventually has to turn. PP4Y has a bit of a problem. It hasn't got a bottom turret, meaning there's no protection on the bottom of the vehicle. And just here you can see how much damage these guns actually do. That was around about, I think 60 shells of the MG141 being used. Not very good aim, and you can imagine what would have happened if those were gun pods. Now, you've probably pointed out that I have exactly 7 seconds of fuel left, but we're at an altitude of 3.5 kilometers, and the nearest airfield is not too far away. If you're gliding back to base, and if you're using minimum fuel load, as I do suggest you use on most planes, the way to go back to airfield is by turning on your manual engine controls, activating prop pitch, and turning it down to 0. This will reduce the drag. You can also close the radiators. Obviously, with no engine, you don't have any overheating issues. Regardless, though, the last guy standing was in an 82. He made a bit of a detour around the side of the map. Again, another one of those kind of hanging stranglers, I like to call them. Instead of, I'm not going to say bail out of the game, but instead of kind of submitting to the fact that they lost, these players try to, I guess, get one last torpedo off, damage one last AAA. Overall, it's not worth your grinding time. What you're doing is you're spending 5 to 7 minutes going back to base, rearming, taking off, going around the side of the map to get maybe one destroyer kill. Trust me, from an efficient point of view, this is the most inefficient way to play the game. So what I did was I went back to the main airfield, not the main one, but the one in the middle of the map. A bit of a controversial place here. Once the landing craft, which if you don't engage them, will automatically take over the island. Well, what I had to do here is I had to land, rearm, repair, and just as the enemy airfield got taken over, obviously I bail out of my plane because there's no point in staying on an airfield that's now captured by the enemy and has AAA that's firing directly at you. So I simply bailed out, the 82 got shot down, and the match was 100% over. I think this is one of the fun parts about the game, is learning certain characteristics on certain maps, because on Norway, if the German team does not engage the landing craft, they automatically lose one of the most important parts of the map. So, G14, a bit of a rundown. A lower BR than the G14 in the German tech tree. Definitely easier to unlock as there's less grinding required, and overall performance that has anything and everything to do to rival the enemies. Is this a plane that you should go and research? Yes. Is it a plane to put a talisman on if you're trying to grind further? In a lot of cases, if you got the spare money, hands down, yes. Because I don't know when new vehicles will be added to the Italian tech tree, but when they are, I know which plane I'm using to grind them out.